have to give props to a friend of mine who has the uncommon ability to actually see the bullshit that's in front of him. This video is, of course, another Zeitgeist video. Perhaps it will be the last for some time, but nonetheless, I thought I'd bring this one up. Let's just, for the sake of this argument, bend the entire logistics issue. We concede to our opponents in the Venus Project that it is entirely logistically possible to achieve the ends of it. We can have superabundance and all that. It's technically feasible. Okay, with that in mind, we have to understand that within the literature of the Venus Project, it is claimed that this is a peaceful movement, that it adheres to the non-aggression principle. This is according to the host of V Radio, who supposedly talks to Jacques and Peter and Roxanne on a regular basis. And if you have listened to his recent shows, he's talked to Storm Clouds Gathering, he's talked to Stefan Molyneux, and has assured both that there is no violence that will be part of the Venus Project if it should take by storm, this whole world, it gets going. Well, here's the situation. Okay, it goes global. And there are some people that simply don't want to adhere to it. Now, they'll just simply say, well, we'll ignore them. They'll live on their own land. They'll be independent from us. Okay, they're independent from you. To achieve the ends of the Venus Project, it is said within the literature there must be a global survey of all these resources, right? So you need to actually have global access to everything to achieve superabundance. This is essentially what they're saying in the literature. We don't need to go over the details of exactly how much of the globe they really need. Let's just say for the condition it's an all or nothing exercise to achieve these ends, especially of particular kinds of ends, like, I don't know, food, or industries that require certain kinds of metal, like Colton steel comes to mind from, I think, the interview with Storm Clouds Gathering. So, be that as it may, you have the problem here that must be addressed. If these people will not trade with you for these resources, and they will not cooperate with allowing you access, strategic access, taking from the literature here, to the land and the resources, what do? I mean, really, you can't adhere to the non-aggression principle on one hand and have your logistical reality achieved here if we go by the preconditions of the Venus Project, which is global survey of resources, which implies all resources must be held in common for this system to work. Just period, end of story, flat out. So that means that we must then address the ethical consideration of the Venus Project, which has a contradiction here. If we consider this from the rule utilitarianism perspective, the principle of universal benevolence of John Bentham, which is the foundation of also rule utilitarianism, says that we adhere to then the non-aggression principle in this context because it maximizes the good in the world. At the same time that we should, in theory, according to utilitarianism, also try to maximize the good in the world with respect to the logistical application of the Venus Project. So which one is right? Which one leads us to then this maximum good? If we just take consequentialism a la, again, rule utilitarianism as the basis of our argument for the ethical considerations here. Well, that leads us to the problem of they look exactly the same in the utilitarian perspective. And then, of course, we could talk about the Kantian situation of categorical imperative, but I'm not well versed on categorical imperative in its various forms. So I'm not going to deal with that. But just on the consequentialist perspective here, which is a fairly commonly held perspective, even amongst people not versed in moral philosophy, it looks like a contradiction has just appeared. And so, in essence, the Venus Project is not attainable ethically. At least not without violating its core rule, which is, well, we can't violate anyone's rights here. We can't egress. And then on the other hand, we can't go without globally accessing and surveying the resources. I mean, you can't have both. Can't have your cake and eat it too. So either the Venus Project people have it all wrong with regard to their conditions for logistics, meaning maybe they don't need even one-fifth the world's resources or even one-fifth the world's land masses. Or the ethical consideration is, of non-aggression is off the table and anything goes to achieve the logistical ends here because by their reasoning perhaps the logistical ends is the ethical highest moral imperative here in terms of a utilitarian consequentialist perspective. Well, I think that's kind of the situation here. I don't think they can balance both. They can't have both. And I think either Peter Joseph hasn't thought about this, and it's not surprising because he's a music geek. I'm not trying to be mean to him. I don't think the guy's actually well versed in the classical considerations of ethics. And same thing with Jacques Fresco and Roxanne Meadows. I don't think a lot of people think about these things. So, at the end of the day, either you're going to see those three folks, kind of the trinity of the Venus Project, pull a Moses and change the rules of what is defined as non-aggression and what is defined as aggression. Coming up with the Ten Commandments kind of situation here. Um, or you're going to see them completely ignore this and, they'll just kind of fade into obscurity because people with enough insight of that kind of ability to detect bullshit in front of them will just simply avoid the movement altogether. Essentially, either the movement will split or it will fade into obscurity because it can't keep its bullshit straight. And I think that's really the issue here. Ethically speaking, it's not achievable. You can't have non-aggression on one hand and then say you're going to have resources all held in common on the other. It's just that simple. And so at the end of the day, I don't think there's really any other way for them to justify their position. I think this is kind of literally the St. George and the dragon situation. I think this is the lance right through the heart of this dragon. I don't think there's a way for them to get around it. I would love to see them try to get around the ethical dilemma, but I ain't going to bother responding after this point to any more videos or even commentary on it. I'm done. So, take the ethical argument, run with it. Give props to my friend who will remain nameless until maybe later. Maybe I'll IM him on Steam and ask him if he wants me to point my shit to his YouTube channel.